The breach charge didn't blow for 3 full seconds. The team stood frozen in the alley, watching the door that wasn't opening. Radios crackled. Someone cursed low. Lieutenant Markham checked his watch. Then the thermal feed. And still said nothing. From the back of the stack, Sergeant Lynn moved without a word. She dropped low, circled left, and pulled a manual pry bar from her pack. No one noticed her go until the side gate cracked open and light spilled through the hallway. One shot echoed. Then silence. When they entered, the hostages were already free. She was already gone. The inside of the mobile command truck was lit by alternating glows, dim white from the overhead panels, red from the lens-capped flashlights moving across tablets and map boards. A single countdown clock pulsed above the central monitor array, displaying the mission window in a slow, even rhythm. 30 minutes of total op time. No one looked at it directly anymore. They had all seen it for hours. The vehicle was parked behind a walled compound near the outer ring of the city's exclusion zone. Engine idling, under silent mode. Humidity clung to every surface. Outside, the night was static heavy and windless, thick with dust and unburned diesel. Inside, 6 men and 2 women from different uniforms circled the objective plan. Most wore the sand-toned fatigues of the U.S. Ranger Detachment. The others were local SOF, geared light but fast. Their shoulder flashes barely visible. Beneath chest rigs, they spoke in clipped, low tones. Code and call signs slipping between languages with no need for translation. The target building was marked on the screen as a former embassy annex, now repurposed by unknown hostiles. Reinforced exterior. Steel-reinforced interior doors. Intel pointed to 2 hostages, 1 diplomatic. 1 contractor held on the upper level, a single hallway approach, 3 rooms off axis, and at least 1 door reinforced with an electric kill lock. The thermal drone feeds showed no movement, but the window for viable rescue was narrowing. Time-stamped intelligence from the embassy blackout showed the power grid being rerouted. There was reason to believe rig deadman triggers were in play. Mission brief ran to 11 minutes flat. Lieutenant Harlan delivered it without inflection. No animation. Just facts. Stack teams. Breach timing. Fallback zones. Come silence after entry. His voice was clean. Procedural. Nobody challenged his layout. They had worked under tighter timing, but never with fewer confirmed internal visuals. The drone coverage had been lost after the second sweep, and the backup schematic still carried the red tag of outdated marks. One of the local operators adjusted his rifle sling and whispered something in Dari to his partner. A ranger nodded across the room but didn't speak. No one needed icebreakers. Everyone knew their lanes. Above them, the mission clock dropped below the 1-hour mark. No alarms. No dramatics. Just that soft mechanical blink. 59 minutes. 58. A wall of layered maps rustled as someone folded a corner to match the current satellite pass. The operation was now live. Staff Sergeant Elena Ruiz sat on the edge of the tailgate bench, her back straight, her hands methodical as she folded the last loop of breech tape into the gear roll. Each tool was secured with tension cloth. Edges aligned. Nothing loose enough to rattle. The others moved around her in broader arcs, talking across packs and tossing gloves into open crates. Someone had left an energy drink wedged between 2 gear bins. It had gone warm hours ago. Another ranger checked the charge fuses with one hand while adjusting his helmet strap with the other. The space was tight, layered in sweat, rubber, and stale heat. No one disturbed her, but no one invited her in either. Ruiz's gear was already packed before the call came through. She wasn't fast. She was early. The hand-sketched schematic folded into the inner pocket of her vest showed 3 entry paths. Not 1. each labeled in her own marks. Room 2. B had a gap in the inner wall they hadn't caught on the satellite pull. She'd noticed it from the angle of the lighting on the thermal scan, probably a reinforced bulkhead hidden in plain drywall. She made a note in pencil next to the backup line. Just a single word blocked. A round hair. The mission brief was playing back on a loop. Lieutenant Harland was narrating the entry flow to a small crowd around the mobile screen. The projection showed the same 4-room corridor again and again, always from the top down, never from the human angle. His voice didn't shift tone. Even when someone questioned the timeline between the breach and the stairwell pivot, he just repeated the flow. Ruiz stood a few steps behind the group. Her gloves were folded clean across her forearm, fingertips curled inward like a form of habit. She watched the screen once more, but her eyes were on the wall. Junction marks. The lead wire for the charge door was reversed in the diagram. Nobody else noticed. She didn't say a word. One of the younger specialists nudged a tablet across the table and joked without turning, saying, "You good?" Ruiz, "Just here in case Harland loses the keycard?" A few chuckled. The lieutenant didn't react. He barely acknowledged her presence, except to assign her to the stack without looking up. Backup breacher. Rear flank. Same designation as last time. She nodded once. No answer was needed. Her presence wasn't dramatic. She didn't fidget or check her watch. She adjusted her vest slightly, pulled the schematic once more to ensure the corner was folded sharp, and tucked it back inside her chest pocket. The paper edge sat flush under the flap, its ink already faded at the crease. As the last names were called out and assignments confirmed, her name came last or close to it. Not a pause. Not a question. Just a technicality. She was already ready. Harness fastened. Gear strapped. Charge tools clipped into place. She didn't need a second rundown. She had already memorized the floor spacing by shadow offset hours earlier. No one asked for her opinion. No one noticed she hadn't spoken a word. The team moved under cover of layered rooftops and broken alleys, the city's low-rise architecture casting long angular shadows beneath the overcast night. Lights stayed off. Footfalls were shallow. The target structure loomed 4 blocks ahead, a thick-walled rectangle set behind a rusted gate and a fence already breached from an earlier operation. No sirens. New dogs? Just the distant thrum of a generator and the occasional flicker of infrared strobes mounted to squad shoulders. Lieutenant Harland led with the kind of pace that dared challenge, never breaking stride, even as the path narrowed. He called out sector markers with clipped assurance, voice low through the comms. Stack 1. Entry angle confirmed. Secure north face. Stack 2. Flank and hold. He didn't consult. He didn't check alignment with anyone else's feed. The digital schematic lit up his wrist tablet with confidence. 1 route. 1 breach. 1 clean finish. Staff Sergeant Elena Ruiz moved in the second column, 2 bodies back from the tail. Her breath was even. She adjusted her shoulder strap once, pulled the folded schematic from under her vest strap, and ran her thumb along the inner crease. Her backup route, side entry Bravo, was marked in hand-drawn ink, tucked behind a shallow ledge near the west-facing service corridor. She had flagged it twice in prep. Once in the thermal blind spot of the main entry vector, Harland had waved it off. Near the corner wall, she knelt briefly behind the stack as others flowed past and taped a slim secondary charge beneath a loose vent panel. No one noticed. It was smooth, quick, and buried behind a metal gate plate she'd studied earlier that afternoon. She rejoined the line as they moved to final staging. Jokes passed quietly between the 2 lead men, something about post-op pizza and who had next detail on base. One of them tapped his helmet twice in rhythm, waiting for Harland's signal. The other smirked and muttered, "Routine's a gift." Ruiz didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on the curvature of the hallway corner just visible through her helmet cam. It didn't match the schematic. She knew it 2 seconds before anyone else would. The lines weren't clean. The outer wall should have dipped 5 degrees. It didn't. The countdown showed 9 seconds. Ruiz flexed her gloved fingers once, checked the alignment of the man in front of her, and shifted her weight. No warning. No protest. Just a silent adjustment. The comms clicked. The red glow of synchronized triggers lit the inside of her helmet for half a breath. 3 seconds. 2. 1. The door blew inward on command. A controlled blast of shaped charge and heat tape, peeling the frame just enough to break the latch. But what met them on the other side was an open hallway. It was steel flat. Cold. Wrong. A second blast door stood barely 5 feet beyond the threshold, angled to the left. Its surface matte black with no visible seam. No window. No hinges. Just a sealed faceplate and the faint tick of running electronics behind it. Lieutenant Harland stood in the breach. Weapon raised. Index finger hovering just above the trigger. He didn't move. His silhouette filled the entry frame, paused against the glare of his own NVG overlay. The comms line held open, but no command came. The geometry didn't match his plan, and for 2 long seconds, he stopped processing. The hallway was supposed to run right, but the wall turned left, and the entry vector had shifted by meters. 1 breath passed. Then another. Behind him, Ruiz registered everything at once. The door, the silence, the flicker in the thermal band that hadn't spiked until just now. Her helmet HUD showed a heat bloom through the left wall, too tall for a standing guard, too irregular for storage. It moved. Her voice didn't enter the channel. She didn't wait. Ruiz slipped low, moved off the stack, and rounded the exposed corner to the west. Her motion was clean, balanced. Weight kept low through her knees as she approached the fallback entry she'd marked. No call-out. No protest. She reached the service panel, removed the gate plate she'd pre-loosened earlier, and slid through the crawl-space alcove with her weapon forward and breath held. Inside the secondary corridor, shadows broke against a dim red utility light. The shape she'd seen was real, a hostage seated and wired to a pressure plate on the floor. 1 man stood over him, arm raised. Unaware. Ruiz fired once. Center mass. The body dropped in place. Clean. No ricochet. No cry. Back in the main stack. Harlan was still silent. Someone whispered his name. It didn't reach him. Ruiz's voice cut in calm. Room clear. 1 friendly. Threat down. Plate active. Holding position. The silence after that wasn't shock. It was recognition. The crawl space opened into a service corridor, no more than a meter wide. The kind meant for HVAC access, and emergency wiring, not movement. Ruiz kept her profile low as she eased into the tight passage. Rifle tucked close. Breath shallow. The red maintenance light ahead threw a faint glow across uneven flooring, casting her shadow in flickers across the wall. She moved without noise. Each step pressed into the floor with even pressure. Hair boots never dragged. Every sound was measured. At the first intersection, she paused and reached into the left side utility pocket. Her fingers found the small black handle of the mirror tool. She extended the telescoping arm and slowly angled it around the corner. The polished circle caught the scene with surgical clarity. 1 man, armed, shifting his weight near a seated figure, hands bound, ankles zip-tied to chair legs, torso bent forward. The hostage's boots rested on a pressure plate, wires trailing to a junction box, tucked behind a steel support beam. The enemy's weapon was at his hip, safety off, barrel angled toward the floor. Mid-motion. Not aware, not expecting a breach from this angle, Ruiz collapsed the mirror and reholstered it. She brought the rifle to centerline, angled her hips forward, took one quiet breath, and stepped cleanly around the corner. One shot. The round hit high center chest. The man dropped instantly. No scream. Just the sharp exhale of surprise and a dull thud against concrete. She advanced without hesitation, muzzle steady, eyes scanning corners in quick flicks. The room was shallow, ceiling low. Cables strung loose across beams as if rigged in a hurry. No additional hostiles. No movement beyond the twitch of the dead man's arm. She kept her weapon up for 3 more seconds, then dropped into a kneel at the hostage's feet. The man's eyes were wide but dry. He didn't speak. He was trained or too far gone to panic. Ruiz's gloves moved fast, peeling back the cover plate of the pressure trigger and exposing the wiring beneath. The junction was old, manual rig, not connected to a phone dead. Just hardwired resistance to a battery loop, the kind of thing built with desperation and short time. She traced the loop with one finger, found the pivot node, and reached for the cutter on her belt. It took 12 seconds. No announcement. Just quiet tension in her jaw. Breath measured through her nose. One wire. A quick tap. She severed the loop clean and slid the battery free. The plate light dimmed. Only then did she speak. Room clear. One friendly. Threat down. Plate disarmed. Standing by. Her tone was leveled, not cold precise. The hostage hadn't moved. She cut the ankle ties first. Then the wrists. Her motions were careful, never yanking. He blinked hard and tried to stand. She steadied him with one hand, the other still on her weapon grip. The radio flared as the team caught up, their footsteps rushing hard from the main corridor. Orders layered over one another. Calls for med check and safe confirmation. Ruiz stepped back, eyes already on the next corner. Her voice never raised, her heart rate never speaked. No one had seen how she got there, only what she left behind. The hallway cleared quickly after the second sweep. No remaining hostiles, no second trigger. The call came to fall back, and the team moved as a unit. Voice low, rhythm regained. Ruiz stayed close to the hostage, one hand steady on his arm as they stepped over debris and broken gear. He limped, but stayed upright. She didn't speak unless necessary. Outside, the exfil trucks pulled into the outer lane, engines rumbling in standby. One medic moved to the hostage with a scanner already primed. The man barely said a word as he was loaded onto the tailgate. Harlan stood nearby. Expression unreadable. Eyes fixed on something behind her. He said nothing. The drone that had logged the breach had already been turned off. No one caught her exit on feed. No one marked her position when the hostage was stabilized. Comms returned to base protocol. It was as if the moment had passed and sealed itself behind them. Ruiz walked toward the second vehicle alone, helmet still on, visor shading her eyes. The others were already on board or moving forward. She said nothing, offered no recap, made no effort to correct the record. She watched the last evac truck roll away in silence. Boots planted, unseen. The after-action room was cold, half-lit by wall-mounted fluorescents that buzzed faintly against the silence between statements. The projection screen displayed a frozen frame from the op footage door breached, smoke still curling from the blast seam. Nothing past the threshold. The drone had shut down seconds later. No one mentioned that. Lieutenant Harlan stood at the front of the room, hands resting lightly on the edge of the briefing table. His tone was composed, voice steady, as he walked through the report. Breach sequence followed planned entry. Primary door yielded. Team stack adjusted due to internal architecture anomaly. Hostile neutralized. One hostage recovered. Minimal resistance. There was a pause. No one questioned the phrase internal architecture anomaly. It gave enough shape to the freeze without naming it. Harlan didn't mention the second blast door. He didn't mention the stall. And no one asked. A junior officer in the second row glanced at a notepad and offered. The secondary breach was that from Stack 2 Harlan didn't hesitate. Support vector from side 2. Operator Ruiz responded to flank clearance and assisted recovery. The word assisted landed without weight. Another officer nodded, as if that clarified everything. The screen refreshed to a timeline map, showing the main breach path in green, the side vector in pale gray. There were no names on the lines. Staff Sergeant Elena Ruiz stood just inside the rear of the room. No one had introduced her. No one had asked her to speak. She remained in uniform, sleeves still dusted with brick grit, helmet tucked under one arm. Her gloves were clipped at the hip, untouched since extraction. A communications tech slid a tablet closed without tapping submit. Her original log time-stamped entries, voice cut from the live feed. Route vector annotated remained in queue. He glanced toward the screen, saw the revised version matching Harlan's phrasing, and marked it as final. No protest. Just process. At the close of the review, folders were passed down the table. Mission summary. Tactical notes. No formal commendations issued, just sign-off sheets. Ruiz received hers without a word. Inside, the report listed her role under support breach movement, no reference to threat elimination. No detail on the disarm. A single line read, entry timestamp unverified. Her eyes rested on the section labeled breach lead. The line below it was blank. No one noticed she hadn't signed. No one asked if the version was accurate. She closed the folder, placed it in her lap, and waited for the lights to turn off. Back at the forward operations base, the tension had already started to evaporate. The mission was over. The gear was coming off, and the air in the tent had shifted into something looser, louder. Laughter carried across the space from the bench near the comms desk, where 3 of the lead stack operators had already opened a shared pack of chips and were replaying their version of the breach. The phrasing had changed since the debrief, more confident, more polished. Lieutenant Harlan's name was repeated a few times. His call to push through the second corridor, now credited as decisive. It wasn't contested. No one interrupted. The story was settling into shape. The mission board had already been wiped. A new sheet had been pinned up, names in dry erase forming a fresh rotation. Ruiz's name was gone. So was the old schematic. The corner where she'd folded her backup route into the plastified layer was now blank, smudged gray from the swipe of a careless hand. She stood in the doorway for a second. Helmet under her arm. Listening. No one called her over. She moved to her gear locker, 3rd row from the end, and opened it with one slow turn of the latch. Her breech gloves were still inside, folded the way she had left them before step-off. The compartment smelled faintly of cordite and antiseptic. Her bag sat on the bottom shelf, half-packed. Zipper caught slightly on a loose strand of nylon. She didn't sit down. She just started placing items inside the mirror tool. Still clean. The schematic. Still folded. Her backup charge harness. Never used but always prepped. Everything went in without hurry. She didn't look around until she heard the quiet crunch of boots near the edge of her bunk. A junior teammate barely 20. New to the rotation. Often quiet, paused just long enough to leave something on the cot. Then he stepped away without saying a word. He didn't glance back. Ruiz finished zipping her pack and walked over. It was a note, folded small, tucked from view. Just a scrap of field paper. The kind used for coordinates or supply handoffs. She unfolded it without ceremony. It read, "You saved him. I saw. No name. No timestamp." She turned it once in her fingers, then slid it into the back cover of a thin notebook tucked inside her duffel. That notebook already held other single lines. quiet acknowledgments, scribbled truths that never made it into command summaries. Some were old. Most were unsigned. She closed the duffel carefully and lifted it over one shoulder. The noise behind her carried on, unbroken. Stories looping. Laughter warm. A second tray of food passed hand to hand without pause. She didn't interrupt. As she stepped out of the tent, the flap closed behind her with a soft sound, the kind of silence that comes not from being forgotten, but from being the one who remembers. The office was small, tucked inside a modular unit behind the motor pool, its window covered with mirrored film that kept out the afternoon sun. Ruiz stood just inside the doorway for a moment, before stepping forward. The air inside was still. A fan rotated in slow, uneven arcs behind the desk. The man seated across from her wore plain fatigues. No unit patch. Just a clipped badge, clipped low on his chest. His nameplate read Monroe. Sid. He didn't stand. He just nodded once, motioning for her to sit. "I appreciate you coming," he said, voice even. "This isn't a formal session. You're not on record. No notes unless you want them." Ruiz sat without responding. Her posture was neutral. Legs even. Hands resting on her thighs. Monroe studied her for a moment, then slid a folder across the desk. It stopped against her elbow. "There are inconsistencies," he said. "Enough to warrant a supplemental report. You're not the only one who saw it, but you're the only one who acted." She didn't open the folder. He gestured to the envelope still tucked beneath it. "Statement goes in there. If you want it. Could mean commendation. Could mean reassignment. Could mean fallout." Ruiz didn't blink. Fallout from what? He leaned back, folding his hands. From rewriting a version that already works. They've moved on. But if you don't want your part erased, this is the time. Her fingers brushed the edge of the folder once. Then she pushed it gently back toward him. It didn't scrape. Just a soft slide against the metal surface. "I know what happened," she said. He looked at her carefully, as if waiting to see if more would follow. "It didn't. That's enough," she added, standing. Monroe didn't argue. He just nodded again, almost respectfully this time. As Ruiz turned to leave, the folded note from her bunk shifted slightly in the pocket of her uniform. She didn't reach for it. The flap closed behind her without sound. The breech range was mostly empty by the time the sun dipped below the far ridge. Shadows stretched across the plywood structures, leaving the angles sharp and the interior lanes dark. Ruiz moved through the course alone, one charge at a time, never rushing. Her motions were compact and precise. No wasted energy. She moved with the rhythm of someone who didn't need to prove anything, just maintain the edge. Her gloves were dusted with chalk from the breach simulator. She adjusted her grip before every door, counted her steps inward, and cleared corners with muscle memory. No timer, no instructor, just her breath and the soft thud of footfalls on packed gravel. When she finished the run, she reset the targets herself and moved to the bleachers at the edge of the field. A younger soldier barely in uniform a year stood near the third station. Her breaching posture was off. Feet too narrow, arms tense. The male instructor beside her gave curt directions. Too fast. Too dismissive. He didn't correct her angle when the blast door simulator swung wide and her step faltered on the pivot. She tried again. Same misstep. Ruiz watched without speaking. After 3 more attempts, the girl gave a quick nod, said nothing, and walked off toward the side barracks. Her posture was squared, but her hands fidgeted as she pulled off her gloves. She passed by Ruiz without meeting her eyes. Ruiz stood slowly, walked back to her pack, and pulled out the folded schematic she'd kept from the last op. The lines were clean, annotations sharp, red ink layered with graphite. She tore a clean corner and added one note beneath the side corridor: rotate left. Not backstep. She folded it twice, walked after the girl, and caught up as she reached the first row of bunks. Without a word, she slipped the paper into the younger woman's hand and kept walking. The girl paused, unfolded it, stared down. She didn't call out. Ruiz didn't turn back. Her gloves still held the faint grit of chalk as she crossed the training field again. Shoulders level. Pace unhurried. The paper would last. So would the lines. And maybe that was enough. She moved without a shadow beside her. But the route would be used again. The training yard was busier than usual, filled with the low, steady rhythm of a full-team exercise rotation. Dust clung to boots, vests, and the edge of every target barricade. At the breach course, a junior officer jogged to position, checked his charge alignment, and gave a quiet nod. The door burst clean on first try tight angles. No, ricochet. Pivoted rotation through the inner frame with textbook precision. The clearing motion was faster than the instructors expected. No one had taught that angle during the week's run-throughs. One of the range sergeants raised an eyebrow, glancing at his clipboard. Where'd that maneuver come from? The officer shrugged lightly. Just something I was shown. No elaboration. No name. A few in the group made notes. One instructor muttered something about adapting it into next quarter's drills. The schematic the junior had tucked into his vest pocket fluttered slightly in the breeze. The corner was worn. The lower edge was folded 3 times. A thin red line cut diagonally across the corner entry path, an adjustment to the base route that wasn't standard. Ruiz stood near the far fence, clipboard in hand, not part of the exercise rotation. Her role now was logistics gear checks, readiness tallies, safety sign-offs. She hadn't run the breach course in months. She didn't need to. What she recognized didn't require a name attached to it. The movement, the pacing, even the pause before the pivot, it was hers. Not the copy of it. The exact route, the same angle she'd marked in red, the same rhythm she'd passed on without speaking. No one looked toward her. No one pointed her out. She didn't expect them to. She turned back toward the equipment lockers, checking a supply list without breaking stride. Her gloves were tucked through her belt loop, chalk marks still faint from the last loadout. Behind her, the junior team reset for another run. The same route, same sequence, slightly sharper this time. Ruiz didn't slow. Recognition didn't have to arrive with ceremony. Some things lasted in motion alone, and the shape of the movement, that clean, deliberate pattern, was enough. She was never the one they expected to lead, never the loudest in the room or the first name on the report. But when the mission stalled and hesitation took hold, she moved quietly, precisely, without asking. What she did won't be written in the citation, and most won't remember who turned the outcome. But she will, and those who saw will remember too, even if they never say it out loud. This is a story about presence without praise, strength without spotlight. It's about knowing your worth, even when no one else does, and acting, not for credit, but because it needs to be done. If her story stayed with you, take a moment to reflect on the quiet leaders around you. Share your thoughts in the comments, or follow for more stories that honor the unseen strength behind every mission